That morning, the stone steps of the Seattle courthouse felt like ice against my bare feet. I stood there in a simple cream dress, nothing extravagant, just elegant enough for what should have been the brightest day of my life. My fiancée, Sarah, gripped my hand, her fingers warm and steady. She glanced at her watch, her brow furrowing slightly. "They'll show up," she whispered, more hope than certainty in her voice. I didn't answer. My eyes stayed fixed on the courthouse entrance, searching for familiar faces that deep down I knew wouldn't appear. My name's Anna, and that was the day I learned what family truly means in my case, what it doesn't. The spring air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of cherry blossoms from a nearby park. I adjusted my dress, smoothing out a wrinkle, trying to distract myself from the hollow ache in my chest. Sarah squeezed my hand again, her thumb brushing over my knuckles. "We don't need them," she said softly. I forced a smile, but the sting of their absence burned. The pastor's voice broke through my thoughts. "The judge is ready," he called from the doorway. I took a deep breath, blinking back tears that threatened to smudge my drugstore mascara. Sarah's sister, Rachel, and my best friend, Claire, stood behind us, their presence a quiet comfort. They were our witnesses, the only ones who bothered to show up. No parents, no sister, no one else. Just us, stepping into a future we'd have to build ourselves. As we walked inside, the polished floors echoed under our footsteps. The courtroom was small, with wooden benches and a faint smell of old paper. The judge, a kind-eyed woman with silver hair, smiled warmly. "Ready to make it official?" she asked. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Sarah slipped a simple gold band onto my finger, her hands steady despite the weight of the moment. I mirrored her, sliding a matching ring onto hers. They weren't fancy, just $200 each, all we could afford on our entry-level salaries. But they were enough. The ceremony lasted 12 minutes. 12 minutes to vow a lifetime together. The judge pronounced us married, and Claire let out a small cheer, breaking the solemn air. Rachel hugged us both, her grin wide. For a moment, I felt light, like maybe this was enough. But as we stepped back onto the courthouse steps, the absence hit again. They really weren't coming, were they? Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. "They're not here, Anna." "Are they?" I shook my head, a single tear escaping. I swiped it away quickly, refusing to let it ruin the moment. "Let's go home," I whispered. Our home was a cramped one-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill with peeling paint and a leaky faucet. It wasn't much, but it was ours. That night, we ordered takeout from the Chinese place downstairs, our makeshift reception. I sat on the floor, surrounded by cardboard boxes of lo mein, and checked my phone one last time. 3 messages from my mom glowed on the screen, each one a knife to the heart. "Anna, this is humiliating. A courthouse wedding? What will people think?" The second, "Your mother is devastated. We raised you better than this." The third, "Lauren says you're throwing your life away. That girl will never be anything." I stared at the words until they blurred. Sarah found me there, curled up against the kitchen counter, my face streaked with tears. She didn't say anything, just sat beside me, her shoulder brushing mine. The silence was heavy, but it was hers, and that made it bearable. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady. "They don't get to define us." I looked at her, my partner, my home. And in that moment, I knew she was right. 2 months before my courthouse wedding, I stood in the back of a glittering ballroom at Portland's Pioneer Square, watching my sister Lauren's $500,000 wedding unfold. The chandeliers sparkled, casting golden light over tables draped in silk. My mother, Ellen, wore a custom Vera Wang gown, her eyes glistening as she dabbed them with a monogrammed handkerchief. My father, Richard, gave a speech about legacy, his voice thick with pride. To Lauren, he toasted, "Our shining star." The crowd clapped, their smiles wide, while I lingered in my assigned bridesmaid dress, a stiff taffeta thing they'd chosen without asking me. I adjusted the dress's itchy neckline, feeling like an afterthought. Lauren, radiant in her couture gown, danced with her new husband, a hedge fund manager with a Rolex that caught the light. The guests fawned over them, whispering about her bright future, her perfect match. I caught my mother's eye across the room, hoping for a nod, a smile, something. She looked away, her attention back on Lauren. My father didn't even glance my way. They were too busy basking in their golden child's glow. The contrast to my own wedding couldn't have been starker. Lauren's reception had a live band, a 5-tier cake, and a guest list that read like a who's who of Portland's elite. Mine would have takeout noodles and a folding table in a 1-bedroom apartment. I swallowed the lump in my throat, telling myself it didn't matter. But it did. It always did. Back then, I was still trying to prove myself to them. I'd graduated top of my computer science class at the University of Washington with 3 job offers waiting. I'd called my parents to share the news, my voice bubbling with excitement. "That's nice," Anna, my mother had said, distracted. But Lauren just closed a deal with a big investor. "Can we talk later?" My father hadn't even picked up. They were too busy planning Lauren's next networking event. That night in Portland, I slipped out early, the music fading behind me as I stepped into the cool night air. The city lights twinkled, indifferent to my hurt. I drove back to Seattle, the 3-hour trip giving me too much time to think. Why was Lauren's every move a triumph, while mine was barely acknowledged? Why did they pour everything into her money, attention, pride while I got scraps? The answer was painfully clear. To them, I was the spare, the one who didn't fit their vision of success. When I got home, Sarah was waiting, curled up on our thrift store couch with a mug of tea. "How was it?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. I sank beside her, the weight of the night pressing down. "It was Lauren's world," I said, my voice cracking. "I was just standing in it." Sarah set her mug down and pulled me close. "You're enough, Anna. More than enough." Her words were a lifeline, but the hurt still lingered. 2 months later, in our tiny Seattle apartment, that hurt came roaring back. I sat on the kitchen floor, surrounded by takeout boxes, my phone glowing with my mother's messages. "A courthouse wedding? What will people think?" Her words echoed the disdain I'd felt at Lauren's wedding, the same dismissal I'd endured my whole life. I scrolled through the texts again, each one a reminder of their priorities. Lauren's wedding had been a spectacle, a monument to their pride. Mine was an embarrassment, a stain on their image. Sarah sat beside me, her presence studying me. "They don't see you," she said quietly. "But I do." I looked at her, my eyes stinging. The pain of their absence, their judgment, was sharp, but it was starting to shift. In that moment, I realized something. Family wasn't about blood or approval. It was about the people who showed up, who stayed. And Sarah was my family now. As I leaned into her, the first seeds of defiance took root. They could keep their pride, their golden child. I'd build something they couldn't ignore. The kitchen floor in our Seattle apartment was cold, but Sarah's presence beside me was warm, grounding. The sting of my mother's messages still burned, but something else was stirring inside me. Defiance. Determination. I wiped my tears and looked at Sarah, her eyes steady, unwavering. "Remember that app idea we talked about?" she said, breaking the silence. She opened her laptop, the screen casting a soft glow across the takeout boxes scattered around us. I sniffled, my voice hoarse. "The one for streamlining supply chain logistics? The one nobody wanted to fund." Sarah nodded, her fingers already typing. "Forget funding. We've got the skills. We've got our savings. Let's build something they can't ignore." Her words lit a spark, and suddenly, the weight of my family's rejection felt like fuel. Every slight, every dismissive comment, every disappointed glance I'd turn it into something real. That night, we worked until dawn, sketching our plan on napkins from the Chinese restaurant downstairs. The apartment smelled of soy sauce and coffee, our makeshift war room. I scribbled code snippets while Sarah outlined the business model. We were two women in their 20s, with $10,000 in savings and a dream bigger than our bank account. But we had each other, and that was enough. "This is it," I said, holding up a napkin with our logo sketch, a cascading wave, symbolizing flow, efficiency, us. Cascade Innovations. For 2 years, we lived on instant noodles and grit. Sarah took freelance coding gigs, her laptop humming late into the night. I poured everything into perfecting our prototype, tweaking algorithms until my eyes burned. We worked in that tiny apartment, with its flickering lights and noisy neighbors, but it felt like a fortress. Every rejection letter from investors, every maybe next time, only pushed us harder. My sister Lauren's voice echoed in my head. That girl will never be anything. I'd prove her wrong. I'd prove them all wrong. One day, an email came from a tech giant in Silicon Valley, $150,000 a year to join their secure programming team. It was double my current salary, a safety net most people would grab. I stared at the offer, my cursor hovering over accept. Sarah walked in, saw my screen, and raised an eyebrow. "You're not seriously considering it, are you?" she asked, her tone teasing but firm. I laughed, shaking my head. "No way. We're too close." I hit decline, my heart racing. We weren't just chasing a paycheck. We were chasing a legacy. Those years were brutal, but they forged us. We learned to celebrate small wins, a bug fixed, a pitch deck polished, a rare night off with cheap wine and a movie. Sarah would joke, "We're the ramen queens of Capitol Hill," and I'd laugh until my sides hurt. But beneath the jokes, there was a fire. Every time I doubted myself, I'd look at our framed courthouse wedding photo on the wall, next to a napkin with our first business plan. It reminded me why we started. Not for my parents' approval. Not for Lauren's shadow. For us. By the end of year 2, our prototype was ready. It was sleek, efficient, a game changer for supply chain management. We'd poured everything into a tour savings, our sleep, our hearts. I looked at Sarah one night, her face lit by the laptop's glow. "This is going to work, isn't it?" I asked, half expecting her to hedge. She grinned, her eyes fierce. "It's going to do more than work. It's going to change everything." And in that moment, I believed her. We weren't just building an app. We were building a future, one napkin at a time. Our first meeting with investors was in a sleek conference room in downtown Seattle, the kind of place that smelled of money and skepticism. My hands shook as I set up the laptop, the weight of 2 years of ramen-fueled nights pressing down. Sarah stood beside me, her calm confidence a lifeline. 5 women in tailored suits sat across the table, their expressions unreadable. "Let's see what you've got," one said, her tone clipped. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding like a drum. Sarah started the pitch, her voice steady, outlining Cascade Innovations' vision, a platform to revolutionize supply chain logistics. I clicked through slides, showing data, projections, the grit behind our dream. Then came the demo. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a silent prayer in my throat. "Please work." The screen lit up, and our prototype ran flawlessly, every click, every transition, perfect. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that could mean triumph or disaster. One investor leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "This actually works," she said, almost surprised. Another scribbled notes furiously. By the end, they weren't just listening, they were competing. "We'll offer $2 million for 10%, one said. "Make it $3 million, another countered. Sarah and I exchanged a glance, her lips twitching into a grin. We'd done it. We'd turned napkins into a deal. That night, we signed the papers in our Capitol Hill apartment, the same place where we'd sketched our first plans. Claire, my best friend, popped a $10 bottle of champagne, the bubbles fizzing over the rim. "To Cascade Innovations," she toasted, her voice thick with pride. Sarah raised her glass, her eyes locked on mine. "To us," she said softly. I clinked my glass against hers, my chest tight with something bigger than joy. Validation, maybe. Or defiance. The next morning, I stood on our tiny balcony, looking out at Seattle's skyline. The Space Needle gleamed in the distance, a symbol of ambition etched against the gray sky. Cascade Innovations was no longer a dream, it was real, with an office lease, a small team, and a bank account that didn't make me wince. I thought of my parents, of Lauren's glittering wedding, of the courthouse steps where they hadn't shown up. They'd called my dreams small, my life a mistake. But this? This was undeniable. Sarah joined me, slipping an arm around my waist. "Feels good, doesn't it?" she asked, her voice warm. I nodded, leaning into her. Better than good. It feels like the start. And it was. That first break was the crack in the wall, the moment we stepped out of their shadow. Cascade Innovations was ours, built from our sweat, our love, our refusal to break. As the city hummed below, I felt it in my bones. We were just getting started. 10 years later, I sat in a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows, the San Francisco skyline stretching out before me. Cascade Innovations was now valued at $3.5 billion, a tech empire built from napkins and grit. I was CEO, Sarah ran operations, and our 600 employees called a gleaming campus in Mission Bay home. My assistant, Claire, yes, the same Claire who cheered at my courthouse wedding, knocked on my door, her face unusually grim. "Anna, security just called. There are people at the gate." I swiveled to my monitor, pulling up the security feed. The grainy image showed two figures I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. My mother, Ellen, and my father, Richard. They looked diminished, like shadows of their former selves. Ellen's designer blouse was wrinkled, her once perfect hair dull. Richard's posture sagged, his suit ill-fitting. "They say they're your parents," Claire said, her voice tight with protective anger. "Should I have security turn them away?" I zoomed in, studying their faces. Ellen's cheeks were streaked with mascara, her eyes red. Richard kept glancing over his shoulder, like he expected someone to pounce. They looked desperate, broken. My finger hovered over the intercom button. Part of me wanted to leave them standing there, to let them taste the abandonment I'd felt on those Seattle courthouse steps. But that would be too simple, too fleeting. I pressed the button, my voice calm. "Let them in. Tell security to escort them to the main house. I'll be there soon." Claire raised an eyebrow. "You sure about this?" I stood, smoothing my tailored blazer, the kind of outfit Ellen used to dream of owning. "Absolutely." I glanced at the security feed one last time, a small smile tugging at my lips. It was time for a family reunion, but on my terms. My phone buzzed as I left the office. A text from Sarah. Saw the feed. "You okay? Want me to come home?" I typed back, "Stay at the office. I've been preparing for this for 10 years. I stepped into the elevator, the hum of the descent matching the steady rhythm of my thoughts. They'd called my courthouse wedding a disgrace, said Sarah would never amount to anything. Let them see what their shameful daughter had built. The drive to our house in Pacific Heights was quick, the city's hills rolling past in a blur. Our home was no mansion, but it was elegant lean lines, modern glass, a far cry from the Capitol Hill apartment where we'd started. I walked inside, the marble foyer cool under my heels. Claire was waiting, her tablet in hand. "They're in the living room," she said, her eyes sharp. "Jessica's with them. She's not happy." I nodded, picturing Jessica, our head of staff and Claire's wife, glaring at my parents. "Good. Let them squirm." I paused, adjusting my cufflinks. "Prepare the guest house, Claire. I think my parents might be staying a while." She gave me a knowing look before heading off. In the living room, Ellen and Richard sat awkwardly on a cream sofa, their hands clasped tightly. They looked out of place, like relics in a world they didn't understand. "Anna," Ellen whispered, standing as I entered. "You look successful." Her voice wavered, a mix of awe and shame. I kept my distance, gesturing to the sofa. Sit. Would you like a drink? Water? Wine? We have a Pinot that costs as much as the cake you bought for Lauren's wedding. They flinched, sinking back into the cushions. Richard cleared his throat. Water's fine, he mumbled. I called for Jessica, who appeared instantly, her gaze icy as she sized them up. Water for our guests, I said, and a glass of Pinot for me. Jessica shot them a look that could have frozen the bay before retreating. I sat in my favorite armchair, crossing my legs, and let the silence stretch. They'd come to me, broken and begging. And I was ready to make them feel every second of it. The living room in our Pacific Heights home was quiet, save for the faint hum of the city outside. My parents, Ellen and Richard, sat on the cream sofa, their water glasses untouched on the coffee table. I leaned back in my armchair, the glass of Pinot in my hand catching the light. Jessica lingered by the door, her tablet ready, her glare fixed on them. Ellen's eyes darted around, taking in the sleek furniture, the abstract art on the walls. Your home is beautiful, she said, her voice small. We never thought you'd do this well. I took a slow sip of wine, letting her words hang. You'd know if you'd read any tech magazine in the last 5 years. My tone was even, but sharp enough to cut. Or opened the Christmas cards we sent. Or showed up to any keynote I gave at a conference. Richard's face tightened, his hands fidgeting. We made mistakes, Anna, he said, his voice low. We're here now. Mistakes. My voice sliced through the air, cold and precise. You lost the right to call them mistakes when you told your country club friends I was figuring things out, instead of building a billion-dollar company. Ellen flinched, her mascara smudging further. I set my glass down, the clink loud in the silence. You're here because you need something. So, let's hear it. Ellen's lip trembled. Everything's gone, she whispered. The house, the cars, our savings. She looked at Richard, who nodded, his eyes on the floor. Lauren's investment firm had collapsed. We trusted her. Put everything we had into it. I leaned forward, my smile thin. Let me guess. Her revolutionary fund was a house of cards. A Ponzi scheme, maybe? Their stunned faces were answer enough. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through a news alert I'd saved. Brightstar Capital under federal investigation. I read aloud, my voice steady. Investors lost $10 million. Suspected fraud. My favorite part? The Golden Child's empire was built on lies. Richard's jaw clenched. How did you know? He asked. I tilted my head, my smile cold. I've had a private investigator tracking Lauren's deals for years. The moment she started funneling money through offshore accounts in Delaware, I knew it was only a matter of time. You spied on your own sister? Ellen's voice rose, a mix of shock and anger. No, I corrected, my gaze unflinching. I protected myself from her. The same sister who told investors not to waste money on my little startup 7 years ago. A memory flashed, overheard whispers at a Portland gala, Lauren's voice dripping with disdain. Anna? She's just playing with computers. A hobby, really? I stood, walking to the window, the San Francisco skyline glittering below. You backed her every step, I said, my back to them. Her $500,000 wedding, her Harvard MBA, her bright future. And me? You couldn't even show up to my courthouse wedding. Ellen's sob broke the silence, but I didn't turn. We're family, Anna, she pleaded. Despite everything. Family? I spun around, my voice low, dangerous. That word only matters when you're desperate. I sat again, leaning forward. Here's my offer. You can stay in the guest house. It's comfortable, nothing like your old Lake Oswego mansion, but it'll do. For 6 months. Ellen's face lit with hope, but I raised a hand. There are conditions. Non-negotiable. Richard nodded quickly. Anything, he said. I smiled, the kind of smile I'd perfected in boardrooms. First, you work. Maintenance, gardening, chores. You earn your keep. Second, no contact with Lauren. If I catch you talking to her, you're out. Third, weekly family dinners here. You'll listen to every story you ignored for the last decade. Ellen gasped, but I pressed on. Starting with the day you left me standing on those courthouse steps. The silence was heavy, their faces pale. Finally, Ellen nodded, defeated. We'll do it, she whispered. I stood, smoothing my blazer. Good. Jessica, show them to the guest house. First dinner's tomorrow at 7. Don't be late. As they shuffled out, Ellen whispered to Richard, Do we have any choice? I watched them cross the lawn, my heart cold. None at all, I thought. That's the point. The dining room in our Pacific Heights home glowed under soft chandelier light, the table set with crisp linens and gleaming silver. My parents, Ellen and Richard, stood awkwardly in their wrinkled clothes from yesterday, looking out of place among the elegance. Ellen fussed with her faded blouse, while Richard stared at the elaborate place settings, his hands clasped tightly. Tonight I'll be serving, I announced, taking my seat at the head of the table. The kitchen staff had prepared everything, but Ellen and Richard would bring it out. Serving? Ellen's voice cracked, her eyes wide. Like waiters. I smiled, my tone smooth. Exactly like waiters. The dishes were labeled, starting with soup. They exchanged a glance, then shuffled toward the kitchen. I heard muffled arguments, the clink of bowls. They returned with pumpkin soup, their hands trembling as they set them down. The bowls wobbled slightly, the soup lukewarm. I stirred mine slowly, letting the silence stretch. Do you remember my graduation party? I asked, my voice casual but pointed. Ellen nearly dropped the bread basket, her face paling. The one you missed because Lauren had a networking event? I continued, my eyes on them. I graduated top of my computer science class at the University of Washington. Summa cum laude. 3 job offers on the table. I took a sip of soup, the cold broth mirroring the chill in my voice. You weren't there. Ellen's lips parted, but no words came. Richard mumbled, We sent an invitation response and a $100 check. I set my spoon down, the clink sharp. The same week you bought Lauren a $50,000 SUV for landing her first internship. I leaned back, crossing my arms. I showed up to that party alone at a diner in Fremont, still in my graduation robe. Families celebrated around me. The waitress felt so bad, she gave me a free dessert. They sank into their chairs, looking small, out of place. Main course, please, I said, my tone clipped. They hurried back, returning with plates of salmon, their movements stiff. I pulled out my phone, a news alert glowing on the screen. Look at this, I said, holding it up. Federal probe into Bright Star Capital expands. Lauren's outdone herself this time. Ellen's fork froze midair. She made mistakes, she said weakly. She didn't mean to steal millions. Or your retirement. I sliced into my salmon, my voice steady. Did she convince you to mortgage your Lake Oswego house for her guaranteed fund? Richard's face tightened, his silence a confession. I poured myself more wine, the liquid catching the light. You judged Sarah, called her a mistake. How's that judgment working out? Before they could answer, my phone buzzed a security alert. I opened the camera feed, my lips curling. Speaking of bad choices, your golden child is trespassing on my property. Their heads snapped up, eyes wide. Lauren's here, Ellen whispered. I nodded, texting my security chief. Don't worry. They'll handle it. I leaned forward, my voice ice. Did you tell her you were here? Ellen stammered. She called earlier. We just said we were safe. I fixed her with a stare. Remember our deal? No contact with Lauren. Ellen's eyes filled with tears. She's desperate, Anna. The FBI froze her accounts. Her partner left her. She's living in her car. That's her problem, I said, standing. Since you broke the rules, let's move up tonight's agenda. I paced to the window, the city lights twinkling below. Remember when a tech giant offered me $300,000 a year to stay instead of starting Cascade? You don't, do you? You were too busy planning Lauren's 30th birthday bash. Richard's voice was barely audible. We see it now, Anna. You've done great. No, I snapped, turning to face them. You don't get to claim pride in this. Lauren called my company a cute hobby to investors. Said I was just her geeky sister playing tech. Ellen's face crumpled. She wouldn't. I cut her off. I have the recording. Want to hear it? The silence was deafening. I smiled, cold and sharp. Main course is over. Desserts in the kitchen. Something simple. Humble pie, maybe? As they shuffled out, I watched the security feed. Lauren's car peeled away, gravel flying. Your turn's coming, sister, I thought, my heart steady, my plan unfolding. The morning light filtered through my office window in San Francisco, papers strewn across my desk. I was reviewing contracts when Jessica knocked, her expression urgent. Your sister's ex, Emma, is here, she said. Says it's critical. I looked up, surprised. Emma hadn't reached out since her divorce from Lauren 2 years ago. Send her in, I said, leaning back in my chair. Emma walked in, her once polished look frayed chipped nails, a faded designer jacket. She sat, pulling out her phone with a shaky hand. Lauren sent me this last night, she said, her voice tight. You need to see it. The message glowed on the screen. Blame Dad. The FBI doesn't have enough to pin me. He can take the fall. His age might get him a lighter sentence. I raised an eyebrow, my voice low. Blaming her own father? That's a new low, even for her. Emma nodded, her eyes hard. She's unraveling. Called me at 3 a.m., ranting about fleeing to Mexico. I studied her carefully. Why bring this to me, Emma? Last I checked, you were Team Lauren during the divorce. She gave a bitter laugh. Team Lauren? She wanted me to lie to investors, forge documents. When I refused, she threatened to ruin me. Said no one would believe me over Wall Street's golden girl. I want justice now. She leaned forward, her voice steady. I have recordings, Anna. Calls, meetings, everything. I started documenting when I sensed something off, but I was too scared to act. I pressed the intercom. Jessica, get Sarah and our investigator, Kate, in here. Minutes later, they arrived. Sarah's eyes widened at Emma's presence. This is unexpected, she said, sitting beside me. Show us, I told Emma. She played the recordings. Lauren's voice filled the room, bragging about shell companies, mocking investors' trust. Each clip tightened the noose around her. Kate scribbled notes, her face grim. This, with the financial records we've got, proves intent, she said. Emma glanced at me. The leak to the press, was that you? I smiled faintly. I've been gathering evidence for years, waiting for the right moment. Emma's eyes widened. You're sharper than she ever was. My phone buzzed a security alert. My parents were at the gate, demanding an emergency meeting. Lauren had been calling them relentlessly. Sarah grinned. Perfect timing. Tell them about her plan to frame Richard. I stood, straightening my blazer. Better. Let's have a full family reunion. Emma, you in for confronting her? Emma squared her shoulders. After what she did? Absolutely. I turned to Kate. Call your FBI contact. Have them on standby. Then to Jessica. Let security bring my parents in. Then call Lauren. Tell her they're ready to help her escape. I paused, my voice cold. She's walking into a trap. Sarah nodded, already setting up cameras in the dining room. Everything recorded, she said. Emma's eyes gleamed. You're finishing what she started. 20 minutes later, Ellen and Richard sat at the dining table, their faces pale, nervous. Emma waited in my office, ready for her cue. Jessica entered, her voice crisp. She's here. I took my place at the table's head, my pulse steady. Showtime. Lauren burst in, disheveled, her dyed hair tangled, her suit wrinkled. Mom, Dad, we need to move fast, she said, then froze, seeing me. Hello, sister, I said calmly. Sit. We're discussing family loyalty. Care to join? Lauren's eyes darted to our parents. What's this? She demanded. I smiled, my voice like ice. Oh, you'll see. The trap was set, and she was already caught. The dining room in our Pacific Heights home was thick with tension, the chandelier casting stark shadows. Lauren stood frozen, her eyes darting between me, Ellen, and Richard. Sit down, Lauren, I ordered, my voice calm but unyielding. She hesitated, then slumped into a chair, her wrinkled suit a far cry from her Wall Street polish. You'll want to hear this, I said, leaning back. Emma stepped in from the office, her presence like a spark in dry grass. Lauren's face drained of color. Remember those late-night calls? Emma asked, her tone sharp, sweet with venom. Where you planned to pin it all on Dad. I recorded every word. Lauren lunged for the door, but two security guards blocked her path, their faces stone. I pressed the intercom, my voice steady. Jessica, tell our FBI friends they can come in. My sister has some explaining to do. The betrayal in Lauren's eyes was almost worth the decade of pain she'd caused. You set me up, she hissed, her voice low. No, I said, meeting her gaze. You set yourself up. I just made sure everyone saw it. The door opened, and 3 FBI agents entered, their badges glinting. Ellen gasped, her hands covering her mouth. Richard stared at the table, his shoulders slumped. Lauren Weaver, the lead agent, said, "We have evidence of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. You're under arrest." Lauren struggled as they cuffed her, her composure shattering. "Mom, Dad, tell them," she screamed. "I did this for us." Ellen's mascara streaked down her face, her sobs silent. Richard wouldn't meet her eyes. I stood, smoothing my dress. "Actually, I have something to clarify their roles." I nodded to Jessica, who brought in a thick folder. "These records show my parents were victims, not accomplices," I said, handing it to the agent. "Bank statements prove they invested their retirement based on Lauren's lies." The agent flipped through, nodding. "This checks out." They were misled. "You can't trust her," Lauren shouted, thrashing in the cuffs. "She's been plotting this for years." I raised an eyebrow, my tone innocent. "Plotting to expose your crimes? To save our parents from your schemes?" "Guilty as charged." Emma stepped forward, holding her phone. "Agent Carter, I've got recordings where Lauren admits to hiding the truth from them." Ellen's voice broke through, trembling. "You plan to blame your father? Your own father?" I had no choice. Lauren snapped, her calm gone. The fun tanked. People asked questions. Dad's name was on the papers. Emma's voice cut in, cold. "Like you forged my signature on those Delaware accounts?" The agents pulled Lauren toward the door, her suit now soaked with sweat. "You'll regret this, Anna," she yelled. "You're just a bitter nobody playing CO." I stepped closer, my eyes locked on hers. "No, Lauren. I'm the woman who beat you at your own game. Legally. Everything I built is real. Everything you built was a lie." They dragged her out, her screams fading down the hall. The room fell silent, Ellen's soft crying the only sound. "Why?" Richard asked, his voice hollow. "Why protect us after everything?" I sat, my tone even. "Because I'm not like her. I don't destroy family for selfish reasons, even when they deserve it." Ellen whispered, "We don't deserve this." I nodded, my gaze steady. "No, you don't. But this isn't mercy. It's strategy. You'll live knowing the daughter you rejected saved you from the daughter you worshipped." I stood, brushing my hands. "Your guest house stay continues. Keep working, keep showing up for dinners. But now you know exactly what your choices cost." As Jessica escorted them out, Lauren's fate sealed, I felt a justice, sharper and sweeter than revenge. The weight of 10 years lifted, just a fraction, but enough. Morning sunlight poured through my office window in San Francisco, illuminating the final papers on my desk. My parents' 6-month stay in the guest house had ended yesterday. They left quietly, no fanfare. Just a note slipped under the door. "We understand now." I folded it, tucking it away, and turned to the framed napkin on my shelf. Our first business plan, scribbled in that tiny Seattle apartment. Next to it, our courthouse wedding photo, Sarah and me, young and defiant on those cold steps. Jessica knocked, her tablet glowing. The construction team's ready for the groundbreaking. Everyone's in the courtyard. I gathered my things, the napkin frame in hand, and headed out. Outside, a crowd buzzed around the fenced-off lot where the guest house once stood. In its place, the Cascade Technology Lab would rizzy a training center for underprivileged students chasing tech dreams. Sarah waited at the podium, her grin wide. "Ready to build something new?" she asked, squeezing my hand. "Always," I said, stepping up to speak. The crowd hushed, faces eager. 10 years ago, I was told I didn't belong in tech. I began, my voice steady. My dreams were too big, my roots too humble. Today, we break ground on a center to prove those doubts wrong. Applause erupted. In the back, I spotted Emma, waving. After testifying against Lauren, she'd carved a new path in corporate ethics, her courage a quiet triumph. Success isn't about privilege or lineage, I continued, my eyes scanning the crowd. It's about persistence. Every student here will learn that validation comes from creating real value, not chasing status. I lifted the ceremonial shovel, the weight grounding me. My phone buzzed a text from Ellen, saw the lab announcement. "We finally see what you mean by value. We're sorry." I pocketed it without replying. Some bridges stay broken, and maybe they should. After the ceremony, Sarah and I walked the campus, pausing where the guest house once stood. "No regrets about tearing it down?" she asked, her tone light. "None," I said, watching construction crews break ground. Better to build meaning than cling to revenge. Jessica approached, tablet in hand. "Press releases are out. And news on Lauren, she pleaded guilty today. 12 years, possible parole. Full restitution, including your parents' losses." "They made their choice," I said, my voice even, eyes on the rising dust. Back in my office, I pulled out the wedding photo, tracing our young faces. That day, we'd vowed to build something real. I set it beside the napkin, a reminder of where we began. Jessica's voice came through the intercom. "First scholarship applications for the lab are here." I smiled at Sarah. "Want to find the next tech rebels?" She sat beside me, like that night in our Capitol Hill kitchen. We sifted through application stories of grit, kids defying odds, chasing dreams despite doubt. One caught my eye, a young woman with a bold idea, her family calling it a waste. "Schedule her interview," I said, typing a note. "Tell her dream isn't too big. She belongs here." Sarah grinned, her hand brushing mine. The construction noise grew louder outside, creation rising from destruction. Perfect balance. "Your parents might see these scholarship stories," Sarah said, her tone thoughtful. "They might reach out again." I nodded, my gaze on the horizon. "Maybe. But I'm not the daughter craving their approval anymore. I'm not even the woman plotting justice. I'm just building something real." She kissed my forehead, her warmth steady. "That's why I married you on those steps." The San Francisco sunset painted the city gold, not the false shine of Lauren's schemes, but the glow of innovation, grit, true value. They'd called our courthouse wedding a shame, too humble for their world. They never saw that humility, paired with resolve, builds empires that last. And that's worth more than revenge.